Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Rolika. Thank you, Santoshar, and everyone for giving me this opportunity to share a talk on management of corneal ectasia. What I'm going to do is, like, this is for postgraduates. I'm going to be talking about like how you can answer your exam whenever you get a question on keratoconus. So whenever you are talking about corneal ectasia, you need to know what what are the types of corneal ectasia, the prevalence and risk factors, the history, the diagnosis, the medical management, and the surgical management. So my talk is on management. I'll just give a short brief on the first four topics as well. So there are various types of corneal ectasias. Like the most common one is keratoconus, but you also have keratoglobus, Terriens and pellucid marginal degeneration. You have post-keratorefractive ectasia, and you have wound ectasia after penetrating keratoplasties as well. And the prevalence varies according to where you are situated, according to different regions. In our country, it can range from 0.0003% to 2.3%, and it can also go as high as 5.2%. Keratoconus is usually seen in patients in pediatric age group, and it usually progresses until about the age of 40 years. And keratoglobus may be seen in children and may be congenital. Pellucid marginal degeneration is usually seen, and it has an onset in your later ages in life. So what could be the risk factors? There are various risk factors like connective tissue diseases, abnormal retinal function. So it can be also, there are a lot of syndromes. If associated with eye rubbing, it can also lead to keratoconus or the progression of disease of corneal ectasias. It can be because of atopic disease, chronic contact lens uses, and post-refractive surgery. Corneal ectasias are usually bilateral, but it can be unilateral also, because one of the eyes can be subclinical, which may not manifest as a disease. It usually results in corneal thinning, irregular astigmatism, and decreased vision. That's what your patients come to you with the complaints. Usually associated with eye rubbing. They might or might not have a family history. They start at a younger age of onset, and greater progression results in severe loss of vision due to greater irregular astigmatism, thinning, and scarring. And there is a chance of corneal hydrops as well, which can occur in 3% of your keratoconus population. And higher the history of or risk history of eye rubbing and seasonal allergies, they are associated with higher risk of development of hydrops. So how do we decide the treatment? Do the patients need treatment, or how do they present to you? It is based on the severity of the disease and the amount of vision loss. And it depends also on how gradually how the symptoms are reducing. Like, is there a gradual progressive diminution of what? The main complaint patients will come to you is like, I have frequent changes in glasses and gradual diminution of vision. That is one of the signs that you're dealing with corneal ectasia. And also the patient outcome criteria depends on maintaining or restoring or improving the visual function. The greater the delay in diagnosis, the higher the risk of vision loss you have, and it might require a corneal transplant as well. So how do you diagnose it? The diagnoses are based on two important points here, which is the history and the examination. History includes the onset and course, the vision, the ocular history, and the medical and family history. In examination, you need to assess the vision. The most important would be scissors reflex. You need to do external examination like your eyelids, slit lamp biomicroscopy of the cornea, intraocular pressure. You need to do fundus examination and diagnostics tests like topography, tomography, what Rashmi has already spoken about, keratometry, and the ASOCTs. This all will help you in diagnosing whether your patient has a disease or not. And these are the tests. I'll not go into deep because I would like to talk more about the management. So what are the management options? This is a beautiful algorithm which was published in IJO, which talks about that when your patient has keratoconus and when your patient walks into your clinic when he has been diagnosed at keratoconus, based on the grade of KC he has, or based on his history, or based on his demographic high risk factors, what would be the type of treatment you would want to give for the patient, whether you would like to observe the patient or whether the patient has progressed, you would like to do cross-linking, which type of cross-linking, whether it would be epi-on, epi-off, or a laser-based cross-linking, or you would like to do an intracorneal ring segment or keratoplasty. So this nomogram beautifully talks about like at what level you will do which type of surgery or management, which I'll be covering in my next slides. So managements are of two types. One would be a medical management. Why medical management? Medical management is like if it's early grade of keratoconus, or there is no history of progression, or there is no history, significant high risk of progression, then you would like to give the patient eyeglasses and keep them on observation and follow them up every 6 months or 1 year, depending on their age and the risk of progression they have. The second would be contact lenses, depending on the type of keratoconus you have. If it's a mild form of keratoconus, if it's not an extremely steep cornea, you can give spherical contact lenses or a toric soft contact lenses if the patient accepts, because it perhaps gives you more comfort than a hard contact lens. But if there is an advanced disease, then you would, or it's a high astigmatism, or it's an irregular cornea, you would consider a gas permeable contact lens, the rigid corneal gas, RGP lenses, which are known as. And the advantage is it masks the corneal irregularities, that it provides a regular anterior refractive surface, giving a better visual outcome. There are various other types of contact lenses. If you have a high power or something, you can give a hybrid contact lens, or you can give a piggyback contact lens, which are the newer generation lenses, but they also have their disadvantages. So you have to gauge that what kind of keratoconus you are dealing with, what grade of keratoconus you are dealing with, and depending on that, you will take a call on what type of contact lens to give or not. The most important and recent ones are the scleral contact lenses, which have a very huge role in management of keratoconus, because it completely vaults the corneal surface to provide centration, stability, and improved central visual acuity. And a study done by Barron et al. Found that all patients referred for scleral contact lenses who failed to have a RGP lenses were successfully fitted with scleral contact lenses, and they could and the most advantage here is you can customize the scleral lenses, and thus you can give a better visual quantity and quality for these patients. For example, even if with glasses the patients are not improving to more than 612, you can try a scleral contact lenses for this patient, and this patient can achieve a higher or a better visual quantity and quality. But the disadvantage is that it has decreased your exchange and difficulty with insertion. You need it's a learning curve for your patients to insert and remove the lenses. So you have to educate your patient extremely well that how to go about it with the scleral contact lenses. And just you have to give them a disclaimer that scleral contact lenses or any of the contact lenses are just one sort of visual rehabilitation to improve the visual acuity, and they will not arrest the disease process. So they need to be on regular follow-ups to see whether the disease, what the condition of the disease. The other medical management would be to check your Ig levels of the blood. All this most of the keratoconus patients are associated with eye rubbing. So if the higher, even if they don't have any known allergies, or if it's a subclinical allergies which they are not aware of, it will make them rub their eyes, which will lead to the keratoconus disease. So it's extremely important to check their serum Ig levels. And even if it's associated with atopy, ocular allergy, or not associated with it, you need to manage the serum Ig levels along with your keratoconus medical management or surgical management. The other drop is cyclosporin drop 0.05%, which is keratoconus is an inflammatory condition. So it helps in controlling the inflammation, and it helps in stabilizing the disease, which is not always, but yes, if it's an early grade of keratoconus with mild risk of progression, you can always keep the patients on cyclosporin A 0.05%. And other newer drops are Trehalose. Trehalose also reduces the oxidative stress and enhances the autophagy mechanism in the corneal epithelium, thus like having a better health of the corneal epithelial cells, and thus it gives a better outcome in a keratoponic eye. And the newer drop, which is being in clinical trials, is the IV Med 80 drops, which is like a LOX enhancer. It's a copper-based formulation. So it will be like a eye drop therapy to stabilize the progression of the disease and even flatten it. It's like a medical cross-linking, but it's not. It doesn't use riboflavin. It uses the IV Med 80 drop. So these are all the newer therapies which you need to keep in mind when it comes to medical management. Surgical management, the base and the most important surgery is done is the corneal cross-linking. It is designed to increase the biomechanical rigidity of the cornea, It is achieved by local photopolymerization using the UVA light and topical riboflavin as the photosensitizing agent. The aim of cross-linking is to arrest or slow the progression of corneal ectasia in the early diseases, and it's a US FDA approved procedure for patients between 14 to 65 years of age with known history of keratoconus. So there are various types of drops available. The most important which you have to know is 0.01%, 0.1% and 0.2%. They are mixed with either HPMC or dextran based drops, or they are the hypoosmolar drops. And based on the concentration you are using, you have different protocols like accelerated cross-linking, hypoosmolar riboflavin-based cross-linking, contact lens assisted cross-linking, lenticular assisted cross-linking, pulse cross-linking, or a photo activation of chromophore cross-linking. So these are just the various protocols of like a Dresden protocol. The basic one, which you all have to know, which is also known as conventional cross-linking. There you soak the cornea with riboflavin for 30 minutes, where you put 1 drop every 2 minutes, and then you give the fluence for 3 millimoles centimeter square for 30 minutes of irradiation time. The accelerated protocol is the next protocol which all of you need to know, where the soakage time is for 20 minutes, where you put the riboflavin drop every 2 minutes, and then you irradiate the cornea with 9 millivolts per centimeter square for 10 minutes. And these are the other protocols with different energies which you can use, and which are also the accelerated protocols known in the literature. But the most important ones are the conventional cross-linking for 30 minutes and the accelerated cross-linking for 10 minutes. And this is the total energy which is used for our cross-linking. The next would be a topo-guided PRK with cross-linking. If you want to regularize your cornea, if your corneal thickness is more than 450 microns, and if it's an early to moderate disease, you can go ahead with a laser-based cross-linking, which is also known as topo-guided PRK with cross-linking. It is done in patients with poor contact lens fit, who are unhappy with glasses, or they don't tolerate contact lenses, they have mild to moderate disease. You can go ahead and do a topo-guided PRK with cross-linking. The various platforms available are Wavelight, Schwind, and others as well, where you can do it. And also Schwind is one of the other platforms where you can use a topo-guided PRK. So what topo-guided PRK does is it makes your cornea more regular, spheric. So it will give your patients a better, best corrected visual acuity, improved contact lens fit. It will reduce the aberrations for the patients. And it also changes the sphericity of the eye. It centralizes your cone, so that if it's a patient has higher power, in future you can do a phakic IOL for rehab of the cornea. The other procedures we have to know is the topo-guided removal of epithelium in keratoconus, where it just removes around 20 microns more than in the stroma, apart from your epithelium, just on the cone area, and then it's followed by a conventional or a accelerated cross-linking, so that here also you can regularize the cone. This is done when your thickness is less than 450 but more than 400, where you cannot do a topo-guided PRK plus cross-linking. You can also do a PTK based cross-linking to remove your epithelium, but only it's done when your TCT is less than 450 microns. It's just another way of removing. And I'll just the other next procedure would be the intracorneal ring segments, which is the Intacs procedure. Intacs procedure is done in cases of decentered cones. There are various types of intracorneal ring segments present, like Intacs and Kera rings. You need to know this is the slide which you need to know, and you need to answer it in your paper if only a question on Intacs is asked. And based on the type of the cone, the location of the cone, the corneal thickness, and the depth, you need to decide where you'll put the ring, the type of ring you'll put, and the incision from where you'll put the ring. You can make the incisions and make the channels for intracorneal ring segments along with a manual dissector or femto-based channels. And this is just an algorithm of how you decide on the rings which you put. And I'll just skip few slides. If it's a thinner cornea, the only option is available is your keratoplasties. No, now there are newer protocols, like if your corneas are thinner than 400 microns, you can use a customized fluence. Your riboflavin soakage time would be the same, but you can use the customized fluence based on the energy you want to use to cross-link corneas thinner than 400 microns as well. And these are some newer methodologies where they do a flash cross-linking, or they use alphatic beta nitro alcohols for therapeutic cross-linking, or they use cross-linking using the rose bangle and the green light to increase the corneal stiffness as well. These are not routinely used, but the newer methodologies in your which are available in the literature and done by some of our groups. And a collagen carbon nanotube composed materials can also be used as tissue engineering to use as scaffolds while doing a cross-linking. And the next two techniques, which if the patients are not eligible for any of this procedure, even of not the cross-linking with thin cornea, then you can go ahead and decide whether to do a keratoplasty. The keratoplasties are partial thickness, which are also known as lamellar keratoplasties, which are the deep anterior lamellar keratoplasties, or a crescentric keratoplasties if it's a localized thinning in cases of marginal degeneration, or a keratoplasty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pooja, to summing up on the time. Now, moving on to our next speaker, I would like to invite Dr.
Only 1 second. Would the chairpersons like to take a discussion regarding the talk, please?
Yeah, provided I'm given a chance.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
I think we are more muted. Yeah.
Actually, we are running short of time.
No, Tanvi, we are not running short of time. Don't worry.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. So, Dr. Pooja, I think it's a very long topic. And
I'm sorry, I cannot cover it in 15
I know. It's a very, very long topic, and you just gave an overview, so which is very good to give it in such a short time. And so what would be your main preference if in one line you have to talk about managing, say, keratoconus with thinner cornea, say like somebody has through 370, 380 microns. What would you like to do for that kind of a 20-year-old patient with keratoconus?
For a 20-year-old patient, ma'am, if with a newer protocol, I would like to do a cross-linking with a modified fluence, where you, as I said, you only do, like, your soakage time is going to be either 30 minutes or 20 minutes based on the protocol, or accelerated or a conventional protocol you choose, but the fluence will be modulated depending on the thickness you have. So that would be my first line of management for my patients. But however, I would like to take a special consent for these patients that as we are doing a cross-linking on a thinner cornea, as you are young, there are higher chances of progression that you might progress after this cross-linking as well. And the next step would be keratoplasty. But as it's a transplant, that is not my first line of management, and that's why I'm going ahead with a cross-linking with thinner cornea.
Yeah, so you're moving more and more away from surgery.
Yes, more and more away from transplants, because that would be the last option for all our patients.
So that's the message which I wanted everybody to take. Thank you.